Robin's on board here. Great. Andrew, Michael, are we ready to go, guys? Okay. Keen to make a go. It's a full day. So, firstly, welcome to it. Normally I like to start my meetings, and I probably shouldn't, by thanking staff for the papers, but I was talking with Rob last night, and I was joking as to whether he had spent time on his motorbike over the weekend by going up to Garston for a coffee. And he quite rightly said to me, no, actually, I was too busy reading your agenda for today. And actually, it just makes me recognise, and I mean the serious point being my appreciation to all of you for being here today, because we do have a full agenda, and we had 757 pages to get through. If you have read every page, I'm not going to test you on that one, Rob, but it just made me recognise and realise that the effort, dare I say it, the cost of your own free time to get ready for meetings, and I'm grateful to all of you. We'll have a very interesting and a good day as we go through it. At the risk that I have offended staff by not saying thank you, can I say to Andrew, your team in particular around the annual accounts, thank you, and to the rest of the staff, Fran, your team, etc., for our PX audit. It's all good stuff, and I appreciate the quality and the effort with which we've got into this work. We do have a reasonably tight schedule today. It would be good to move through our actual meeting, our risk committee meeting, by 12:05. How's that for a very definite time? G'day, Ty. How are you, man? That will be a challenge, given probably the item we have at PX, although that's me perhaps just presuming something. At 12:45, we have the first of two workshops with our colleagues that have reviewed our so-called legal matter, and we have another workshop at 2:45, and I think that's around depreciation funding, which is that's the most exciting part of the whole day. We'll take votes on that by the end of the day. So it is reasonably full, and we will whip through reasonably fast. What I haven't mentioned is that, of course, the critical thing this morning, and the great thing this morning, is that we're dealing with our annual report. Great because we had to bring it forward by 2 months this year to meet the statutory deadlines. We have done that, and I would just like to acknowledge, we'll meet him later on, but Mike Hawken from Deloitte, our auditor, our audit partner, is with us for the course of the morning. So Mike, welcome to the meeting, and later on in the meeting we look forward to seeing you up in front of us. You folk know, I hope, the health and safety procedures better than I do, and I won't go further than noting that you should know them. If you don't, give me a yell. I think we're all here, other than I understand Don has leave of absence, and Darren will be with us later in the morning, probably around about midday. Time for lunch, well done. Okay, so can I just move from the chair, those apologies be noted. I second, please, thank you. Sarah put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Leave of absence, well, we've dealt with Don, so he's fine. Is there any matter here that you need? Yes.
A leave of absence for the 6th of December, the next week.
Oh, okay.
We can cover that off at council.
You cover that off at council? Yeah. Thank you, Jaspreet. We'll do it that way if you could raise it or work with Fiona to have that there then. Thank you for that. Are there any matters here that you need to note your interests? No? Great. I haven't been informed of any urgent or extraordinary items, and we can now move to the minutes of our meeting of the 6th of September. So I'll move from the chair there, taken as a true record. We'll have a second. Yes, thank you. Rob, is there any matters of accuracy, correctness or otherwise that we need to sorry, Fiona, I'm sure they're correct and accurate. Are there any matters of accuracy or correctness people want to raise? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. I went through them. I didn't think there was anything that needed to have follow-up action, so that's fine. And we have no indication that anybody from the public would like to talk to us.
No.
Can we move to the work program, please? Teresa, welcome back. Good to see you again.
You're seeing a bit of me today. Good morning, Mr Chairman, councillors. Paper I'm presenting is the committee work plan for June 2024. I take this report as being read. The following reports have been added or removed from the October meeting. The Ministry for the Environment Class 1 landfill audit report has been added to advise the results of the Ministry for the Environment audits on the Orlestown and Graves Bay Class 1 landfills. The Winton wastewater report has been added to advise the Committee of Developments in this area, and the Deloitte 24-25 long-term plan engagement letter has been moved to the December meeting as Deloitte are waiting on guidance from the Office of the Auditor General in terms of principles, and until this is obtained, Deloitte cannot set the long-term plan audit fee. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, appreciate that. That's really good. The other column, which I know we have added another meeting for the 15th of November, which is extraordinary, and that picks up the formal receiving of a report and paper for which we've got the workshop this morning, this afternoon at 12:45. So it's probably, well, it's a spare column. It's an actual meeting, so don't take that out in your diary. We do actually have a need there. Any comments, questions, Teresa, on this? Being none, can I move from the chair the motion to receive the report and we note the changes made without approval? Second, please. Thank you, Margie. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Great. Right, we've got 4 items which I'd just like to indicate how I'd like to go. We've got the report on the management representation letter. This is a letter that we authorise for Rob and Cameron to sign, and is required by Mike, our auditor. So Mike, actually, by the way, you should come to the front as well now, please, if that's okay. We also then have under 7.4 the actual, Mike's management report, his closeout report, just about done his job, and he's going to talk to us about his findings. We then have the item dealing with the actual annual report, and indeed I've added into that, and you've seen it there under 7.5, the debenture trust deed. What I propose that we do is that we are going to work through all 4 items before we pass any resolutions. At the end of the 4, I will ask that we have committee-only time with Mike. Once we've dealt with that, we will then come back and pass all the required resolutions through those papers. It's really not until we've had that chance, that final chat with Mike, that we should try and deal with any of the resolutions. So we're going to deal with those 4 papers sequentially in the way they are. At the end of that, we'll catch up with Mike, committee only time without staff present. Then we reconvene. We'll pass all the relevant motions that we need to through. That's okay. Okay, so we're into it. So let's deal with the letter of representation. Thank you.
I'm presenting the 22-23 annual report management representation letter. I take this report as being read. The purpose is to recommend to Council that the Mayor and Chief Executive sign the management representation letter for the 22-23 annual report on behalf of the Council. The audit has actually pretty much been complete. There's just some filing work for the audit team to actually do, and all the adjustments has been made. So therefore, we just propose that this letter can be signed, recommended that this letter be signed by Mayor Scott and the Chief Executive.
Brilliant. Just a couple of key points. Mike, the date that you want on the letter will be the day that you deliver the opinion, which is the 25th of October, correct?
That's right, the day the council approved.
Okay, so if you're looking at page 41, you'll see there's still needs to be put in date. And logically, that's the date that we have to make the final set of representations to Mike is our auditor, and so the date on that will be the 25th of October, which is what next council meeting,
Yeah, next week,
when
Wednesday.
you'll receive hopefully, getting through it, the recommendation of this committee that Rob and Cameron signed their life away. Look, the letter is a very logical thing. It basically says, if you want my signature, you guys have got to put your signature to what you're providing us with before I do. It's a fair enough point. If we don't, Mike won't. And can I say that there is significant, sort of the universe falls apart if we can't achieve this letter of representation. Teresa, you've set out well here in the body of your report the individual aspects of the letter with a response by management in terms of why they can give us assurance that actually the various aspects of the letter can be met and signed. Okay, probably a couple that I just want to draw attention to. Page 34, the second bottom row, you'll see there that we're representing to Mike that we believe methods, significant assumptions and data, etc., and supporting accounting estimates, etc., have all been disclosed to him. You'll recall that we have spent quite a bit of time at this committee looking at some of those key accounting estimates and judgments as well. So it's not only is it Anne that's representing that, but we ourselves have participated fully as far as that's concerned. One thing that I just wanted to check with staff is that on the bottom of page 35, we've disclosed all known actual and possible litigation claims. And you're comfortable, Jane, you're comfortable that there are no outstanding matters that we haven't disclosed in our contingencies or otherwise accounted for?
Yes, fine.
Brilliant, look at that. Thank you. And if you, in a very similar way, I can assure you that Anne's kept me abreast of anything, which is, I think, nil. You'll notice that when you go over to page 36, we are saying to Mike, as far as we know, any matter of irregularity, fraud or corruption has been identified by us and he's aware. I don't think we've had any occasion to actually hassle Mike over that. So we're saying we're fraud-free, sort of. And I think the other thing which is really important, which we have a small part to play in, is in the middle of page 37, where we say we've disclosed all related parties. And that isn't quite the same as disclosing our interests, but they may well give rise to a sense of related parties. And I'm making some assumption that we've done it. The final matter I'd like us to focus on is on page 38, which is that the final representation that Mike requires out of us is that we are a going concern. Loosely interpreted, that means we can pay our bills over the next 12 months. So you need to be happy, letting Rob and Cameron sign this, that we're comfortable that we are a going concern. Rightio, it's not quite the same as the solvency test, but it's not that far different if you're into your private sector company position. It's not just private sector. Okay, with that, and a speed read through it, are there any questions folks would like to raise about letter of representation? None? I can move on to the next item. As I say, we're going to come back and pass the whole. Okay, as we go through it. Rightio, let's move to the draft annual report, which is item 7.3, please. And I think, Robin, looks like you're online to take us through it. Thanks.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance and Assurance Committee. Thank you. And along with Teresa, we're presenting the audited annual report to the committee this morning. We'll take the cover report, the annual report, and the summary as read. However, there's a couple of things that we'll point out before asking for questions. So we're asking that the Finance and Assurance Committee recommend to Council the adoption of the 22-23 annual report as per attachment A, subject to any final amendments. Endorse the summary of 22-23 annual report, which is attachment B, and that's subject to any amendments required, and delegate authority to the Chief Executive and the Chair of Finance and Assurance to approve any final amendments to the summary or the full report. We presented the draft annual report to the committee on the 6th of September ahead of being released to Deloitte for audit. At that meeting, there was a number of things identified by the committee in all sections of the report that needed to be changed. These changes have been addressed, including changes in section 1 that were then resent out to the committee for review again last week. Section 1's also been designed by the comms team, and I think the staff members there that will be able to answer questions if there's any around the design. Following from the 6th of September meeting, in section 1, the message from Mayor Scott and our CE in the opening part of the report was rewritten and that was in that version that was sent out last week and then updated again yesterday. In the highlights section, we updated changing the order around a little bit and fixing some wording as appropriate and updating some funding information as requested. And in section 2, we had one KPI that wasn't measured at the time of the 6th of September meeting. This has now been measured and is in the final KPI report, making the total of the 58 KPIs to 45 achieved and 13 not achieved. Section 2, descriptors of the KPI measures and the commentary in relation to those measures in the final year. We've updated some of that commentary, and we've also added some more information around landfill, updated the open spaces visual representation, and completed the editing that's been picked up by staff and the committee and our auditors. Since the agenda for this meeting went out, some of the committee members have contacted staff with other edits and questions. These have been responded to, and all changes since the 6th of September have been kept on a register. I'll hand over to Teresa now to talk us through the financial information. Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Teresa.
The net deficit advised at the September meeting was 8.4 million. This is now 8.3 as a result of the audit process, resulting in a net movement of 91,000. This is due to an increase in the landfill provision of 136,000. That was based on the phasing that the landfill provision was based on, 6,000 reclassification from capital to operating costs, and a decrease in the depreciation as a result of Three Waters asset revaluation adjustment, which was 232,000. The draft audit opinion, as we've discussed, has been provided by Deloitte and will be discussed at this meeting. And as we mentioned, Mike is here to talk about that when we get to the management report. There was a late item that we found yesterday, and that was we have realised that we have booked 230,000 worth of vested assets, which shouldn't have been. We have, Anne has had discussions with Mike, who will talk about this in the meeting, and it's immaterial, and therefore it will just be maybe cast as a minor error on the accounts, and we don't have to adjust it, but we will be adjusting it in this year. We will be removing it in this financial year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Look, Mike, while we will get to your actual closeout report, and I might just leave it, is there any sort of high-level comment you want to make about the annual report itself before I open up for discussion?
No, I think just in terms of high-level observations, it's a good quality document. The process has worked well. We've been through cover to cover and provided our feedback alongside council and management's own review. So we're comfortable with where the document sits.
Brilliant. So, in effect, to summarise, we had a quick change in the dollar numbers from the 6th of September meeting. There is an unadjusted item, which we're not going to worry about because it's not material. And we have essentially a couple of minor changes here. Rob, I think we all agreed through email, and I think you said this, Teresa, there is actually a newer version than the one that we have here, correct?
Looking at Robin, yes, there is. Yes.
We're getting rid of the word phrase profit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's good. Look, that's fine. I think if I've picked it up correctly, Rob, we have got the right version. I think you picked that one up, Julie. It's the one that we'll expect to see in there come the 25th. So I don't think we need to delay that any further. Can I just check in the report itself? There's still some shaded items. I can show you one that here's from page 135, shaded in blue. What does that mean?
So what we do is every time we make a change, like the first set of accounts, we put all the changes in green. Then when we go to audit and they make another set, we put them in blue. And right now, between the meeting this report that we've given and what we'll go to council, we're turning them pink, so that we can keep track of where we are at with our changes.
Great, thank you for that. That's really helpful advice. I perhaps missed the legend, so it might have been given 727 pages of agenda. Might seek a bit of leniency here. Rightio, so there we go. So folk, we've had a good crack at this. Obviously the 6th September meeting, as Teresa said, was critical for us to actually go through on a sort of semi-page by page basis, and I don't propose that we repeat the exercises. One thing I would just point out to us is that I'm always interested in the front end, and that's actually what all of us focus on. And if you look at pages 1 through I'll just find it. Oh, sorry, not pages 1. Let me find it correctly. If you look through pages 55 of our agenda through 87, you have that front piece, Teresa, that you have mentioned, and I think Louise and Chris and team have put a lot of effort into. Because when you go to the summary, which is on page 289 of your agenda, you essentially see it repeated. What does that mean? These roughly 20 pages, 30 pages, are the key document that will go out to the ratepayer in the community, summarising our performance. So that's why at the 6th September one we've focused on that. And again, perhaps before I check on the broader level, if there were any comments or questions that people wanted to raise, obviously, Teresa, you had the odd bit of feedback which you said you're dealing with, or Robin did, which is fine. Is there any other comment people would like to make on those first pages of the annual report? Anything or nothing? Looked pretty clean to me. I loved the stories. They were great. Good way to tell our story for the year. Any offers? No? Okay, let's move past that, because once you get past the page 87 of the account, you get more of the detail. And if you look at 87 through to, and I'll just check the page numbers here for your benefit, pages 200, you've got all the detail of the actual activity statements, performances we've achieved. Again, we've dealt with that in some detail. Were there any last minute comments folk wanted to raise or discuss? Part of that race over the weekend, Rob, 747 pages, wasn't it? No, I didn't think. That's fine, let's keep moving. And in terms of the financials, again, Teresa, and I won't repeat because I'm repeating myself about some very modest changes which have been made since the 6th of September, but largely things have remained the same. Can I just refer you to page 219? They're the primary financial statements. Let's just remember how we look at our comprehensive revenue and expenditure statement. In lots of ways, the one that counts for us is that line called the surplus deficit before tax. Bear in mind that we're not directly a taxpayer, but that's neither here nor there. Where if you look at the first shaded column, you'll see that actually the deficit is 8.366 million. Indeed the number that you were pointing us to, Teresa. And in some sense, from us, as you go into the LTP, that is the key number, because it says that we don't have, well, we haven't received in this year revenue that covers our expenditure. Having said that, the bottom line looks quite different, which is the total conference revenue, which is a surplus of I've got over it, it's $155 million. And the difference there is a key point that we've had and been advised of, which is the revaluation of our assets. I'm going to put it in simple terms. Our wealth has increased by $155 million. Do you feel wealthier? Do you? Why don't you feel wealthier? Why don't you feel wealthier?
It's not cash.
It's not cash. Well, actually, we're not here to have an argument about accounting or economic theory, Paul. We are wealthier. And it reflects...
I've farmed for long enough to understand all that.
we are recognising that we have significant assets which do deliver services. The reason that you might grin at me and say I don't feel particularly wealthy is that we know there's a liability that goes with it. So while we may feel happy to take the $155 million increase, particularly in our roading assets, we know there's also, for next year, a depreciation impact. So if you take the depreciation impact onto a deficit that we're carrying through, You know what I'm saying in terms of the LTP. We've got some challenges that you folk only too well know, but I just want to reflect on that. Can I say another challenge which I would like to reflect on is, can you look at under expenditure, the depreciation line, which says our depreciation for the current year was $36 million. Rightio. Now that number's going to increase because of the value of the assets, as you see there. But if you just flicked over the page to page 223, you'll see our statement of cash flow. So Paul, we're back to cash. Cash is king. So let's just look at that number, keeping in mind that depreciation number of $36 million. That depreciation number is non-cash, so it doesn't actually appear in here, but all things being equal, one might hope that our net cash flow or outflow from operations would be somewhere close to our depreciation. And at $24 million, it is some mark off. Now, there are ins and outs over cash, and we need to be careful in making this comparison, but it does reflect that impact that we still only partially fund depreciation. Okay? The other thing which is important here, and again the results reflected, is if you go down that column from the $24 million, you get to the purchase of property, plant and equipment, which is at $26 million. So again, compare that with the $36 million, what does it tell you? What does it tell you? We're not maintaining our asset base. Now, let's be very careful. This is a snapshot in time. Over time, you want your renewals to be covering the depreciation. So this reflects the real challenge on us as an organisation in terms of capital delivery. Well, actually, it says, firstly, policy-wise, funding our depreciation. We know that we aren't doing that at the moment. There's been direct and definite policy decisions made around this table not to. Okay, so that's number one issue. Number two issue is if we prioritise renewals, and that's been a critical part of the outgoing LTP, 26 million doesn't cut the mustard. So it becomes a real critical thing that as governors going forward, we look at these key indicators. Rightio? So the numbers, and thank you Anne and team, Teresa, for these accounts are really important information to us. Rightio? So I just want to reflect that as you go through it. That's not a problem with, I've diverted us a wee bit from the intention of saying, these accounts true and fair, but actually I just wanted to reflect these are really important numbers for us, because in another way, already you're dealing with them as you consider your long-term plan going forward. Rightio. The other thing then that I would just like to pull us up to is the contingency note. Provisions are minor, and you mentioned provisions basically around landfills, but if we go to notes 30 and 31 on pages 266, I just wanted to check. I realised I got the events after balance date. It's a work in progress. In other words, we haven't quite completed that note, Teresa or Robin. Do we know what's going to go in there at this stage? We need to know by Tuesday.
Yes, currently I have mentioned the flooding, and Deloitte have approved that comment that I've put in on the flooding, and at the moment that's the only comment I have in there regarding that. I did speak to Deloitte yesterday regarding that, and they've said to me that that will be something that they discuss closer to the 25th.
Right, okay. So that's the note, we had the flooding and presumably we had some consequential cost.
Yes, yes, it's approximately going to cost us roughly around 2.3 million with all the flooding that we had in September, and it is going to Waka Kotahi to see if we can get some relief from that, but that's just a comment that's in there.
Actually, I just realised, because there was one thing I was wondering that we probably can't, and I'll probably look to Mike to see whether there's been any lead even in the first 2 days of this week. Where do we mention Three Waters?
Yeah. So we do have and I was going to touch on that, but and I guess for the benefit of council, What we're required to do is the council will approve the financial statements on the 25th of October next week. And of course, one of the things that complicates things this year is a change of government. And often what happens with a change of government is certain pieces of legislation may be repealed or changed. And so one of the things that we will need to be cognizant of is between now and the 25th, are there any changes from government that would impact our financial statements? And I think Bruce is alluding to the water reforms that were enacted under the previous government. There has been some indication that the new government will repeal those. If that repeal process hasn't occurred at the 25th of October, we prepare the financial statements based on the legislation that exists at that particular time. But we do need to monitor and be alert to any potential changes that might occur between now and sign-off date. So yeah, happy to answer any questions on that. It is a little bit unusual, but it is something that does occur, particularly when we have a change of government, that we need to reflect our financial statements based on the facts and circumstances at the day we approve those on the 25th. And so we just need to be quite careful of any changes that might occur in the next week.
We need to be clear that we still, the legislation is in force. It has not been repealed, so we are operating to the three statutes that have been passed, which have heralded moving to, the 10 entities, etc. Arguably, so that does exist. The question is whether there's any arguable or announcement that has any weight from the new government or the new government to be that could have effect, but it may not be. Christine.
Just a comment, because there's no new government at this stage because we haven't even is it a consideration at all?
Probably not, but I think we're being just precautionary to note that firstly we've got events after balance date which isn't yet complete.
Right.
We've heard that it's going to have floods. Mike probably is best placed through the office of the Audit Source whether there could be any statement that might come up between now and the 25th. But I agree with you that relatively, I think given how tight the numbers are, we won't know till the 3rd of November anyway, let alone how long it then takes to negotiate to actually be a government. So we're probably pretty safe at this stage. That's more critical for the LTP. Sorry, Teresa, my mistake. I knew that I didn't actually prepare properly. Where is the comment on Three Waters or affordable water reform area? Whereabouts is it?
It's in the statement of service performance under.
Oh, right up the front. Right up the front. Sorry, I was looking for it in the actual annual read part of the financial statements. Are we able to have a page number, please, just for people's comfort? Oh, there we go. There. Sorry. No, sorry. Look, the one I was looking for, Mike, is page 268, which is indeed part of the contingency note. If you go over the page from where I was, you'll see the word Water Services Reform Program. This mentions the three acts. So largely that is going to stay in place as far as we know. We just have to maintain. This just shows you the accounts stop moving on the 25th in effect. Whether there could or could not be anything added to that. Probably unlikely, but the precautionary note, Christine, that we should just be open to that fact should it occur. Rightio. And again, there's nothing there in terms of the contingencies, which is where we start to always think about, do we have any liabilities that we are yet to be able to be in a position to recognise, which are floating around in the ether. So you get things like risk pool there, where we are a member. There's been a Supreme Court decision, which actually the members of risk pool, we were one at that stage, might have to contribute to. We'll have to see where that one goes, for instance. But at this stage, it's non-quantifiable. Or we've got the LGFA covenant we're party to, which is a contingent liability, but unquantifiable. Very low probability. Right, I think that's a crash course through the financials as well as also the front end, Robin, thank you. And indeed the short front, which actually forms our summary. Final call for any questions. No? We're fine? Brilliant. So that gets us then into The next item, as I say, I'm going to do this. We're not worried about the resolutions at the moment, which is actually, Mike, I think really a chance for you to give us a run through your closeout report, please. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Look, I'll take our report as read, but I will call out, I guess, a few observations and share those with you. Starting off with Three Waters. So you may recall in the last year's financial statements, we had what we called an emphasis of matter in our audit opinion related to Three Waters. And really what that is, it's drawing attention to Three Water reforms and the uncertainty associated with that. That's a guidance note or a requirement from the Office of the Audit. So all local authorities will contain that in the audit opinion. As I say, we are working under that piece of legislation as it stands today. And you know, unless that situation changes prior to the 25th, you know, that's the position that, you know, will reflect in the financial statements. So, you know, in the financial statements themselves, you've made reference to the uncertainties or the process around the Three Water reforms. In our audit opinion, we simply make reference to, you know, those reforms that are disclosed in the financial statements. So when we talk about an emphasis of matter, it's not a qualification. It's not of any negative view of the disclosures or the information in the financial statements. It's simply drawing to attention for the users of the financial statements a significant matter which they should read within the financial statements. So that is largely consistent with what we had in 2022. But that will be a council sector-wide disclosure in the financial statements. So you know, you're consistent with the sector there. The other couple just to call out really is around the property, plant and equipment valuation. You might recall last year, you know, there's a very substantial movement in the valuations that were through both Roding and Three Waters. There was another valuation obviously undertaken in the current year. The expectation was that, you know, there would be more modest movements, I think, in the current year, given some stabilisation of pricing within the construction sector. I guess what we did observe was a reasonably significant uplift in relation to Roding, and that really came through from a change of methodology, particularly in relation to the bridge assets that the council owns, and you know, the areas and how they measure those bridge assets was a slight change in the current year. So that gave rise to a slightly larger than what we might have expected revaluation increase. Certainly within Three Waters, it was more modest, which is what we were expecting. You know, as Bruce alluded to before, you know, there are consequences to these valuation outcomes, particularly in relation to increased depreciation charges. So while it may look benign in terms of the revaluation gains that you're seeing come through the financial statements, it does have a consequence in terms of you know, the considerations around depreciation and how you then fund those consequently going forward. But look, we had discussions with both management and the valuers directly around the valuation methodologies, assumptions, and we're comfortable with where those land. The other one to call out, and I think Teresa will talk to it in a little bit more detail, was just around the landfill. Clearly, you've had some discussion on that already. You know, we did consult with the OAG around that landfill. You know, we've brought a $8.5 million, $8.4 million provision onto the balance sheet in relation to our landfill obligations. You know, there's been some good work undertaken by external consultants and management in coming to that number. You know, it's really a combination of some maintenance activities around certain landfills, but also some more extensive work across a couple of landfills. In addition to that, there's another 14 sites, I think, that are subject to ongoing monitoring, and at some point, you know, they may give rise to liabilities that we recognise as well. You know, the accounting standards are quite clear in terms of the point at which we recognise the liability, and I think it's just worth touching on that. You know, we need to have three sort of key things for a liability to be recognised. We need to have an event that's occurred. That event needs to lead to an economic loss, and we need to be able to measure that. Now, with the landfill provision, historically, we've had the first two. We've had, you know, the event that gave rise to it, which is our consent obligations under the landfill, had occurred. we were going to have some economic outlay as a consequence of that. The issue that we had was the third leg of that test and the difficulty in determining, well, what's our liability? And until that evaluation was undertaken in the last 18 months by both Environment Southland and the external consultants, we just weren't in a position to reliably estimate what our obligations were in relation to those landfill requirements. So that's why we now bring on that liability this year, because we can now measure that liability with some reliability. Liability with some, confidence. Yep. Not to say that it won't change. That's the nature of estimates. Is that we know it won't necessarily be the same outcome, but we can have confidence in the estimate that we've put together now. And that's why we've got another 14 sites that we continue to monitor, because at the moment we're not in a position to evaluate the remediation obligations that we have in relation to those sites. But as it becomes apparent and we're able to measure those obligations, we will recognise liability for those over time. So look, I'm happy to maybe pause there and answer any questions, whether it be on the Three Waters reform, anything else in our report, or evaluations or landfill provisions.
Thank you, Mike. That's tremendous. Any comments or questions for Mike, please?
Yeah,
I'll go for a minute.
in terms of those liabilities and the consistency associated with the liabilities and who's responsible for what, are you saying that you're relatively confident that as a council we can almost preempt where our liabilities lie in light of, say, the landfill situation, or if we have climate, situations where our assets are compromised, and that shared liability, say, with our other councils? Do we have a sort of a fairly good idea of where our liabilities lie within that space? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think certainly based on the work that's been done, and maybe management can answer also, but I think the landfill position is much better understood off the back of the work that's been undertaken in the last 18 months. And my understanding is that further knowledge will be gained from the monitoring activities on the additional sites in the next 2-year period. Until that monitoring activity sort of occurs and we gain a better understanding of what the implications of those sites are, but again, that knowledge will develop over time. So I think the fact that we've got monitoring activities in place and we're able to assess the outcome of those monitoring activities, I think is, it's in as good a position as that we could plan for at the moment.
I think at a time, would we have, do the liabilities fall to us or somebody else? We're probably innately conservative here, and we'll recognise the liability, but whether we had a chance to claim off anybody else, we would treat as a contingent asset at best. And I would be reluctant to recognise them unless there was some further event or action which gave rise to a reasonable certainty of a claim. So we tend to take a conservative position, recognise our liabilities, but are a bit loath unless there's good evidence to recognise somebody else might owe us some money.
Yeah, I think the only thing to add there is you look at those two scenarios almost independently. One is recognising the obligation and the liability that you have. And separately, have we got an opportunity here to recover some of that from somewhere else? We've got reasonable amount of confidence and certainty for the liability. Over here, we're not far enough down the track, is my understanding, in terms of being able to determine that.
Brilliant. Yes, Christine.
Thank you. Very, very helpful comments. Thank you. Just going back to your comments on the valuation, and did I understand that correctly? And you're indicating there was a change of methodology in approaching that valuation process.
Yeah. So the approach to the how they determine the valuation adopted for the bridge assets in particular was a change relative to last year. And look, to be honest, to give context, it's not unusual to develop those methodologies over time. The understanding of council's assets is always improving. Each valuation, the fact that you do one every year at Southland District Council, I think means that there is a good process around the valuations, but the bridge assets in particular was a change of approach in the current year, which gave rise to a larger valuation attributed to the bridge assets.
So that methodology is used across the industry because I see we're the only council to have that surprise upon
Yeah, look, I can't talk to other councils, but one of the questions we did ask was around consistency of methodology, and it is used and adopted by other councils in terms of the approach that's been taken.
Okay, thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chair, what actually happened in that instance was we changed our valuers.
Right.
And the original valuers were only measuring a bridge for the, basically the width of the bridge from on the plates on the ground. But actually, of course, your railings go out, and they weren't measuring that extra bit for the railings. And so the new valuers came along and said, hang on a second, you're missing out on some of the value of these bridges. And so they redid it. So it was actually just due to that change in that value, and that really highlighted that issue.
Do we do any grounds on that bridge?
I would have thought, just checking, Mike, that the majority of the uplift in the valuation related to actually our contract rates or the construction price index. So I think Christina raised that. It's important to recognise the integrity improvement in our data, which is what's been hinted at in your report. But the primary driver in that $155 million uplift is actually the price of doing business has gone up substantially. In 1 year. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. If I may ask, Mike, are there any other councils that you are aware of that have had revaluations of the same magnitude as we have, which is nearly, I think, 23 to 25% of our assets?
Yes.
Or are we an aberration here?
Look, I think you're certainly at the upper levels, and we are seeing more modest revaluation uplifts relative to particularly 2022. Where we saw quite substantial uplifts across certain councils. We do have councils that are not valuing every year, so it's very hard to sort of ascertain or be comparable to other councils because some are booking a movement off a 1, 2 or 3 year time period. So, particularly those that are booking a 2 and 3 year uplift are more significant than those that are booking them annually. In saying that, I think the council uplift in the current year was more significant than probably what we've seen elsewhere. Part of that is, though, driven by the contract rates. I think historically the valuers haven't had a lot of reference points to contract rates, and contract rates are using actual data of contracts that you're entering into as a means of determining, well, what does that construction cost actually incur? And I think what the valuers are telling us is that they've got much better information now around those contract rates, which is why we're seeing them increase and we're seeing them aligned to the actual costs that council are entering into contracts, which is not necessarily the case, I think, in prior years. And maybe, Anne, you'll have a view on that, but that's the messaging that we're getting, is that better information around contract rates is leading to increases in those rates, which is driving some of those increases as well.
Mr. Chair, just a follow-up question. My concern from this is because when you mention that contract rates are what is causing this to the larger extent, I would have expected that other councils will also be entering into similar, at least somewhat comparable contracts. We wouldn't be, getting a huge something which is vastly disparate from, say, another council at the South Island.
No, and one of the things we do is we do look at the relative contract rates, and the valuers look at the relative contract rates across geographies and comparatives to other councils.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit that some other councils have is that they are doing more work in that construction space, and so they have better reference points in terms of a larger volume of contract rates that they can reference to as actuals. I think the issue that Southland's had is that up until the last couple of years, our contract rates were a little bit out of sync with the actual contracts that we were entering into, and that was really just a consequence of volume and not having the same quantity of reference data.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Thank you for the question. Any other questions for Mike? Just a couple from me, Mike, if that's okay. Appreciate you going to that extent, and I also note quality of data and systems we've mentioned in terms of our non-financial performance, which actually we haven't focused too much on today, but is equally important, and I appreciate that. Also note I'm about to say you dig at us, not to dig at us, for the committee to do a bit of homework and pick up on its risk management policy. I certainly look forward to trying to do that. That will be really good. Can I just go to page 341 of our agenda, which is your outstanding matters, please? Am I in front of where you wanted to go, or can I just raise this now? I just want to check that we're in for a soft landing on the 25th. There are 4 bullet points there in terms of outstanding matters. They are still, I would suspect, still outstanding at this point.
Yes, so we have completed our internal quality procedures. So the piece that we control, we're complete. So really from here is the approval process that occurs at council level. And as I say, the thing that council will just need to be cognizant of is that we need to make an assessment of any changes that might occur between now and the 25th when the council approves the annual report. We don't anticipate anything, but we do need to be mindful that it is a possibility.
Just refresh my memory, sorry, but TCWG?
Those charged with governance. I did look at that last night.
Oh, okay, right.
Sorry, we should have spelled.
I won't give you another acronym, but which is probably inappropriate for this meeting. Okay.
It's really referencing the council
representation, which we have already thrashed a bit. Okay, that's good. Subsequent events, we know that we've got a small update coming through from you, Teresa, around the floods with the sense of price. We know about that. And the reporting to the OAG, that's something you just do after the audit, correct? Okay, cool. So in terms of moving parts, you've done your bit, Mike. We need to sign the letter of rec and the annual report, which includes the compliance. We'll do that on the 25th. There's nothing else that's out. And obviously these minor changes, some edits, and that subsequent event note. Otherwise, we're tickety-boo. Teresa and Robin, correct? Yeah?
Yes. Yep.
Sweet. Well, that's a great position to be in. Right, we've still got 2 more things to do before we do our resolutions. With that, can we then just move to the paper 7.5, which is a matter we dealt with quite a bit with Mike when he came with his arrangements letter to do the independent order of the debenture trustee. Probably would like to treat this pretty much as read, Teresa. But is anything you or Mike would want to add about the debenture trustee audit?
No, nothing to add.
Brilliant. Good. It's pretty simple. It's all there, and we've got it signed off. That's great. So look, at this point, Fee, I should check with you. I think I'd like to adjourn the meeting, so we need to have the recording off so that we could have some radio time with Mike for about 5 minutes.
Andrew, can you colour the live stream? I don't colour it dead, just pause it.
I don't want anybody listening on this conversation.
So no one can see or hear anything.
Right, okay, cool. Good. So I'll set it up. Who's going to move that we, the key one on page 31 is obviously we received the report, we comply with it. But what we're doing here is we are recommending the council that Rob and Cameron sign that letter of representation. Just to go back right to the start, there's a letter that we're saying to Mike, we've provided you with all the information, we've given you everything we know about the place so you can complete your audit. Do I have a person? Thank you, Julie. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Margie.
What item that one for?
This is 7.2. So I've got Julie moving, Margie seconding. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, is carried. That's really helpful. It means on the 25th, one of the key elements of what we need to do for Mike can get done. Can I move us then to item 7.3 and page 46, which was the annual report. So apart from receiving and complying, what we're doing under D is recommending that the annual report, as we read it, subject to any final amendments, and we've heard of a couple that are coming through, but essentially we're saying we're editorial and minor in nature. We are going to recommend that this 22-23 annual report be adopted. We also are going to endorse the summary, which is really just a subset of the big one. And we're going to keep a delegation to Cameron and myself in case there's any final amendments that need to be made between now and the 25th, which is probably wise, just given one or two movements as we've seen the audit really remaining open until the morning of the 25th. So there we go. Do I have anybody prepared to move? Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Rob. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. We move then to item 7.4, which is the management report or the closeout report from Mike. And on page 321, it's simply that we receive his report. Do we have a mover in a second? Thank you, Margie. Thank you, Sarah. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. And the final task we have is under 7.5, which is to receive the debenture trustee report from Teresa and to recommend that council approves the signing of the debenture trustee by Cameron on behalf of council. Do I have a mover in a second for that? Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Paul. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. That's great. Well done. You're welcome to stay if you would like to. If you want to move off, that's fine. We are going to make a break in about 10 minutes for morning tea. If you want to hang around and have a cup of tea.
I might be thrown up, please to do so. Thanks,
Look, thank you for being here. It's great to have you here in person. Absolutely superb. That's how audits should be done. And I move us please to item 7.6, which is the analysis of the actual results to forecast. Teresa, you're my journey today.
Yes.
Okay, that's no problem at all. That's right. Thank you.
I'm presenting the actual analysis of the actual results to forecast for the year ended 30th June 2023. The actual results outlined in this report are expected to align closely with the draft annual report 22-23, which is also presented today, which I've been through. However, this report compares the actual results to the forecast budget for 22-23, while the annual report compares the actual results to the annual plan budget for 22-23. The net deficit was 8.8 million compared to a forecast of 10.7 million, which is a decrease of 1.9, and the capital expenditure is 4.2 million versus 41.2 million versus 43.9 million, which is a decrease of 2.7 million. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So this is a really important little reconciliation. I've always been keen, and team have always provided us with a forecast position as in contrast to just budget. And so this is a great reconciliation. Any questions for Teresa? Yes, Paul.
I think you probably picked it up because you referred to it earlier, but on page 363.28, it's about that surge capital spend and invested assets aspect of it. It's over forecast due to the vested assets received by council. I couldn't quite understand how that went together.
The vested assets weren't probably in the forecast, so therefore there was 14.5 million of vested assets that wasn't in the forecast. So therefore they would be in the cast in the revenue and also the capital of 14.5 million more than what was in the forecast.
Right. So, I mean, the way it reads to an outsider is that we received vested assets, but yet it put the capital spend higher.
Yes, because they do go to capital.
Yeah.
So they would have increased our capital by 14.5 million.
Right. Well, this isn't going out to the public anyway, is it? So it probably doesn't matter.
It's a public document.
All right. Well, yeah. I just wonder if it should be a bit clearer.
Okay, so sorry, Councillor Duffy, what was that point?
28.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks for that, Paul. Any other questions, Teresa? I just have one which is not actually one around forecasts, although it's an implication from the forecast, Teresa, so I'm happy if you take it offline. I was interested in the bottom bullet point on page 362, where we have an underspend on capital on CIASA. And that's in relationship again to renewal work, and I'm probably a bit hot on renewal work. John, I don't know the lines or the way we do things on CASA, whether above ground or below ground. It just made me think a lack of maintenance means wear and tear. And again, this is for outside the meeting, but do we have a record of people that are medically reliant on electricity on the island? It's an important part for any...
I'm not sure whether the council does, but the local medical centre will have.
I think what I'm trying to reflect here is if you go back to the early days of Mercury Energy in Auckland, as a supplier of electricity, it becomes important that they are aware, and as where the supplier are aware of people with medical conditions who are reliant on an electricity supply. I'm not saying because we've underspent 173 we've got a problem, but it's just spurred the question in my mind: Are there any? And if so, do we know, so that we as a supplier can deal with the matter should the matter arise? And I say that in light of we haven't done the renewals, but I'm not saying these renewals or lack of renewals would cause a problem, but you know what I'm saying. So it's not for the meeting, but just something to check on. Anything else folk would like to raise? That being the case, can we move to the recommendation, please, which is that that we, I think we've got it right, we received Teresa and Janie's report on move in a second, please. Thank you, Christine. Rob, appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. I'll deal with this next one before morning tea. How far have we got to go to get to PX? More items we need to check. I've got a few, haven't we?
Yeah.
Okay, let's deal with this and then we'll have a break for morning tea. Yeah, this is the two, sorry. I'm just checking on that. So draft accounting policies, Teresa, well done. Thank you.
I'm presenting the draft accounting policies for the long-term plan 2034. I take this report as being read. The accounting policies attachment A set the basis for which the long-term plan 34 is prepared and the financial information compiled. For the long-term plan 34, council staff are recommending the use of the accounting policies from the 22-23 annual report, updated for any necessary changes, given that these financial statements include prospective financial information. I'm asking that you receive the report of draft accounting policies and endorse for council's approval the policies in attachment A for the long-term plan 34.
Thank you. Right, this is again one of those important, albeit perhaps slightly your eyes glaze over when you start looking at accounting policies. You recall part of the committee's role is to make certain how we choose to measure, estimate, and record our transactions is the responsibility of this committee, and it becomes reasonably important. Critical thing that I see from this, and it's in the green, if I read it correct in terms of the way you've constructed the policies, Teresa, is that of course our accounting policies that we have just arguably looked at in terms of the annual report are for past transactions. Really dealing with the LTP, we are looking at transactions which we are forecasting to take place, rather than, so we're trying to predict the future as in contrast to the past. So there is that essentially what are our existing accounting policies, just to acknowledge that we're trying to interpret them in a future looking perspective rather than trying to report on past transactions. That would be the only change that I could see primarily looking at these policies.
Yeah.
So what that says is the way we've measured up to date, so you know we had that very interesting debate around landfills, means that we're going to try and estimate what is our landfill provision over the next 10 years, for instance, but we're going to be applying the same policies that we've been using for our existing end. That's really important because it's against these policies, effectively, that we will report come next year and the year after, well, it won't be next year, but the year after that, that we will report. Any questions, comments people want to raise over that? Right, let's move to the recommendation on page 367, which is that we receive, we comply with the Act, and we endorse. So we're saying we approve them. It means that when you get the first cut of the LTP numbers from Teresa, Robin, team, whoever's doing them all, they will be based on these accounting principles. I'll move in a second, please. Thank you, Margie. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Sarah. Motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Brilliant. I tempt fate and get rid of the last one before smoke, eh? Yep. I've already had the real meeting with Tom, John at the back about Braggs Bay, so I know all about Braggs Bay now, and I've dealt with. No, I haven't. Let's have a crack, guys. So who's speaking to that? Sorry, I need to
We
get.
should have Regan McNaught here.
Is Regan not here?
Regan's not here at the minute.
Are you substituting? No, your friend. Is it? Do I need to let him give him a chance to get here?
He's 1 or 2 minutes away.
Okay, let's break for morning tea. I did promise morning tea after that last item, so that gives Regan a chance to be here. I don't want to cut him out of the action. Can we have a break? Can we be back at 11 o'clock, please? I think that would be fair. 10 minutes?
Yep.
Talking to us, we get a sense of assurance around things like our finances, and he's given us a pretty good tick. But actually, there are other areas and ways in which we get views on our operation, and to the point, MEV review of a couple of our landfills is one of the ways in which we also gain a sense of how management are actually working and controlling things in terms of the operations. So it's a really useful set of reports. So Regan, if there's any key points you'd like us to know, could I invite you to speak to your report before I open up to members to ask questions?
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is we had Ministry for the Environment contact us. They audit all Class 1 landfill sites. Because our green waste sites at Wallistown and Braggs Bay are disposal sites, so material is left on site there, they are classed as a landfill. So as such, we have to pay the $50 a tonne waste levy on top of that. So the purpose of this audit was to confirm that we were paying the correct amount of levy to what product was going in and being disposed of there. The levy found 3 non-compliances at both sites. So they were in relation to a conversion method. So we have to convert it from cubic metres to tonnes. We done that previously based on our own, this is what we sort of think it is, without knowing that there is a set MFE conversion that we have to use. So all 3 of those non-compliances are resolved by using those conversion tables, which we're doing now. Wallistown had a non-compliance for an underpayment of levies of $101. Due to the small amount of that and Council's proactiveness to try and resolve things, MFE have written that off. And Braggs Bay had another non-compliance around the record keeping. So we just weren't holding the exact correct information for long enough. But that is again resolved by using the standard MFE conversion table and spreadsheet of recording.
Thanks, Regan. That's really helpful, and both a clear report from you, plus also MFE, quite a clear report on there. Questions for Regan? Yes, Paul.
Hi, Regan. I just noticed on page 403 and on that Appendix 1, point 4, I think there's an R missing out of the word recording. It says recoding.
Recoding?
In the middle there.
Oh.
Tiger for good English. Thank you, Paul. Well done, man. Okay, other points for Regan.
It's the sign of a very boring life.
I know what you were doing on Sunday afternoon. Is that right? Yeah, 740, page 747. Okay. Anything else for Regan at this stage? Look at Regan, grateful that even that's, you can argue $100, is it here or there? Well done that they've recognised that we've been committed to this. And obviously, right, we need to pick up from that. So everything that we are keen. So that's fine. I guess behind it, is there anything in particular from an operational perspective? I know this is about money. This is about the waste minimisation levy, but is there anything else that we should hear from you at this stage?
Not in relation to this audit report. One big thing about the levy and a concern that we do have is people, public apprehensive of paying so much, unaware of the levy. That is a big one. So we do have situations of people not paying, which when we're dealing with such small margins to keep these sites open, does make it difficult.
So is there much evidence of fly, what do they call it, fly tipping?
It has, we are hearing it a lot more of it. However, we sort of need a map of where it is so we can focus on certain areas. We hear a lot around riverbanks just out of town, which is the usual spots for fly tipping. But we're trying to encourage people to actually call it in. Hey, I was at this spot and seen this, so we can actually start building an image of what's going on around the district.
Brilliant. Thank you. Matt, you got a question?
Thanks, Ruth. Yes, Regan, I'm just looking at the audit report, page 4 of the attachment, so page 393. And it's just talking about how the levy is applied to each tonne of waste, but excludes waste, which, if within 6 months, is reused, recycled, or recovered or treated. So is there any recommendations from MFE on how Braggs Bay or other sites might be able to adapt to be exempt from the levy by a different practice, a different operation?
Yeah, so Braggs Bay is an awkward one, just with the geography, and to the issues around the whole district, to be able to meet that definition of taking material away, there's a high input of costs to be able to get a return on that. So there's no easy way without all ratepayers district-wide subsidising it for the volumes to be able to get through to get any profit back from that. We would be running at a loss. So for these small tonnages, unless we can find, as we're trying to look for, a very low input, low cost way to compost, it's not viable for anyone to have to do that.
Not to be able to get it off site within the 6 months is the point, otherwise the levy automatically kicks in. There is a provision within the legislation that you can actually ask for an extension, which we're going to investigate and see whether or not there are some other options there, but to get it through, to get composted, people would probably realise this, to get it composted within a 6-month window is pretty hard. To have a viable product that you then aren't just putting into a landfill, because if you put it into another site and into another landfill, automatically you'll end up having to pay the levy at that location. So,
with the levies going up, so going up to $60 1st of July 24, is it expected that they will just continually go up as well? Has there been any indication?
I would presume so, that they will just keep increasing. The whole purpose of the levy is to stop people disposing of material, to get the whole reuse, reduce, recycle method going through. So I can only see it just going to keep increasing by $5 or $10 a year.
Just have to keep working in that space.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other questions? Just one really odd little question in terms of how we're set up. The Rekiura Resource Recovery Centre. Is that actually an organisation? What is that?
It's a very... So the Resource Recovery Centre is...
That's a long answer.
Yeah, it's a very grey complex. Who's actually in charge?
My real question was, is this all part of WasteNet?
So this is separate from WasteNet, because these sites are run by SDC.
Brilliant. Okay, fine. Right, can we move to the resolution? It's been really helpful. Again, my thanks, Regan, that we're seeing the organisation responsive to good audits, which is great, which is that we received the report. We're in a second for this, please. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Rob. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Brandon. Right, it's now time for that procedural motion to move into public. We only have one item, which is the one from the wastewater. I'm comfortable that we've got good reason to do that. So I will move from the chair that we move into PX. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Paul. Is there any debate on that motion?
I think we've got someone down the back that we need to allow to stay.
Who needs to stay to allow? Tell me. I think you guys are allowed to stay.
actually, sorry. Yes.
Yes, names?
Sorry, what was your...
Visitor.
Yeah.
In Partington's a consultant.
From the HD. Brilliant. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so is there any debate on... Oh, sorry, did I have a second? Oh, Paul did. Paul seconded. I think that was right, didn't he? So is there any debate on the motion? We're comfortable this goes PX. Great. Can I move the motion then, please? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Can you let us know when we're out of live stream, please, buddy? And gentlemen,